Okay, good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the Planning Committee. And the first item on our agenda, are there any apologies for absence?
None as yet, Chair.
Not so far, thank you. Item 2, any disclosures of personal and prejudicial interests? Are there any? But you would have to, as local member, yeah?
No, my mother lives around the corner from this development, so it's personal and prejudicial. So,
Yeah.
as same as the last meeting, I'll do my pitch and leave.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Oh, yes, sorry, yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks. Anyone else? No?
Yeah.
Councillor Langton Jones?
Yeah, quite by chance, I was asking somebody who was made employed recently, and he's been taking up a job with the developer. So I'm just saying a personal interest, even though I'm actually speaking against it. Okay.
Jones?
You're on mute, Councillor
Yeah, I
Jones.
know my mic wouldn't go off, sorry. It's not a declaration, it's the statement I made last time that I was approached by one of the objectors, but I didn't give any inclination of which way I was going to vote. But I want it just noted in the meeting that I had been approached, and I did meet with one of the objectors, but it was actually I was asked to meet for a different reason, but went on to this about the planning. Okay, thank you. I don't need to fill in a form, I just need to make the statement.
So that's for Fairwood Terrace, yeah?
That's for Fairwood Terrace.
Yeah, okay, thank you. No others? No? Okay, thank you. And then item 3 is to approve and sign the minutes of the previous meetings, and you see them on pages 1 to 10. Page 1, 2, page 3, and page 4, page 5, 6, 7, and 8, that's 1. And then page 9 and 10. If somebody move those to record, thank you. Item 4, any items for deferral or withdrawal?
No, Chair.
No. And there are none. Okay, then. So then we move on to item 5, and that is the planning application that is for Fairwood Terrace. And Chris, thank you.
Okay, before I start, can I just draw members' attention to the update sheet? Reference has been made in the update sheet to 3 pieces of correspondence that we received since the report was written. 2 are from objectors, and the 3rd item is from Persimmon, who are one of the joint applicants. In addition to that, we've received correspondence lunchtime today from one of the other joint applicants. And they have more or less reiterated the comments made by Persimmon in the update letter. They are asking that the planning committee approve the application, as they believe that the development is in accordance with LDP policies. So I wouldn't say any further than that. Okay.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, since the last committee, I just want to record councillors Jeffrey and Tribe have both viewed the material from the previous committee and are both in a position to take part and vote on the recommendations today. Thank you.
Sorry, Chris.
Okay, so in terms of today's report, obviously it's a report following last committee's decision, where they resolved that they were minded to refuse the application on 2 grounds. So we have drafted 2 reasons for refusal, which reflect the 2 reasons given at the last committee. They are set out at sections 3.2 of the report and 4.3. So the first drafted reason refers to the development having an impact on the amenity of local residents by virtue of the increased levels of traffic associated with the development. And the second drafted reason refers to the loss of the trees on the site, which would be detrimental to the recreational value of the site, contrary to policies PS2 and ER11 of the LDP. Obviously, members will be aware that the report before you today sets out that, in our view, the 2 reasons for refusal, which we have been drafted at the request of members, are not particularly strong. We don't think we can defend them at appeal. In terms of the reason for refusal relating to trees, obviously, I think it was accepted by some of the councillors at the last committee that due to the site's allocation for high density development, it's virtually impossible to develop the site in accordance with the LDP without trees being lost. So for that reason, I respectfully request that members perhaps do not pursue that as a reason for refusal today. I think it's going to be very, very difficult for us to defend that particular reason as a council. In terms of the other reason for refusal, which is the one relating to impact on residential amenity, again, we've got difficulty, in my opinion, in defending that at appeal. There was quite a bit of discussion at the last committee about Fairwood Terrace and whether that should be a secondary access or a sole means of access to the site. Since the last committee, we have done a bit more research into this. So if I can just talk you through that briefly, I hope I don't take up too much time, but if I can draw your attention to, again, what it says in the LDP. So Ian, if you can get that up on screen, please. Are you able to zoom in, Ian, on that, please?
Can I ask which page this is on, please? On the report, because you can't read that.
So if you can highlight the relevant bit. So the central section of this part of the LDP, it talks about the primary means of access to the park and ride being made via the new Spine Street from the east. And it also says Fairwood Terrace may provide a secondary access to the park and ride to serve a limited number of spaces and an element of residential development. Now, that sentence, I think you can interpret either way. You can either take the view Fairwood Terrace may provide a secondary access to the park and ride and the residential development, or you can take the view that where it talks about secondary access, it is to the park and ride and to the park and ride only. Now, when it talks about primary means of access, the word primary only refers to the park and ride. The term secondary refers to the park and ride and the residential element. If you can go to the concept map as well, Ian. So what we are saying is the words primary and secondary are only used in the context of describing the park and ride. This is the concept map for the site. So obviously the site we are looking at is the orange area. On there you can see is annotated figure 5 and figure 6. And if you can scroll down to the key below that concept map, Ian. You can scroll across. So number 5 talks about the main access for the park and ride at Gowerton rail station. So again, it talks about main in the context of the park and ride. And number 6 again mentions limited access to the new park and ride. That's the access coming through from Fairwood Terrace. So in both cases, it talks about this, so the primary, secondary access in the context of the park and ride and the park and ride only. And the last document I think we need to show you is the inspector's examination report. So before we adopted the LDP back in February 2019, we had the inspector's report. In fact, there were 2 inspectors, I think, Tom, involved in the LDP. And if I can draw your attention to paragraph 5.43 So the western part of the allocation is that orange area, which is the site we're looking at today. And you can clearly see there, it says the western part of the allocation, including the proposed Gowerton Park and Ride, would be accessed via Fairwood Terrace. There's no mention of the western part of the allocation being accessed from the east. It's only via Fairwood Terrace. So I hope that clarifies the situation. Is it the concept map or the text? Okay, so I think as officers, we are convinced that the means of access of Fairwood Terrace is the point of access into the residential part of this development, which gives us difficulty in terms of that first reason for refusal. Obviously, Matt has provided some text in the report which refers to traffic flows, which I won't repeat in full, but in essence, what Matt has said in his comments there in the report is that the traffic flows associated with the proposed development before you today are lower than the traffic flows which we accepted as being created by the allocated site 5 years ago. So again, it's obviously difficult to use that first reason for refusal on those grounds. Okay, so Chair, I don't think I've got any more to add now, really. I mean, I think I've explained our position. Obviously, we'll take questions later on if needed.
Thank you so
Thanks.
much. Thank you very much, Chris. And anyway, first we have some speakers, and the first person to address us is Carl Jones. And as you know, Carl, you've got your 5 minutes.
Good afternoon. Thanks, Chair, committee members. So these are what we think are the fundamental issues. There've always been serious capacity issues identified at Fairwood Terrace. There's loads of undisputable evidence of this in the similar documents that Chris referred to, adoption, the documents leading up to the LDP and various other things. And this was actually translated into the limit of 35 homes to be serviced by Fairwood Terrace, although nobody seems to want to talk about that or admit to that. However, many of the features for the site in the LDP are obviously specifically designed to reduce traffic flows through Fairwood Terrace. The bus gate, the segregated park and ride, the eastern access road, the LDP explicitly states that these are to protect traffic issues at Fairwood Terrace, and there's also plenty of evidence of that in the LDP preparation documents as well. The LDP never intended for this site to be considered as less than the whole of SDH, so it's impossible to second guess which rules apply or don't apply when just a portion of the site is cherry-picked. The applicant is not only cherry-picking the site, but also cherry-picking the rules. And because of this ambiguity, we say that the only fair and reasonable conclusion you can reach is that the application is not compliant with the LDP, and there should be one reason for refusal. However, whichever way you take that, it's clear that from the LDP or from common sense that a transport assessment was required to quantify the access issues at Fairwood Terrace, and this is the only real possible way where you can fairly determine how many houses can be supported by the access. Now, despite much spin and some over-optimistic conclusions, the applicant's own transport assessment is packed full of evidence to show that Fairwood Terrace and the surrounding area would be very negatively impacted by traffic. Now, where this evidence doesn't seem to suit the purpose, they cry foul. The industry standard Lean-Sig model that's used in all transport assessments must be wrong, etc. The officers also seem to be less than fully objective when confronting the obvious issues and really only accepting the evidence that seems to support the application. This includes this latest cherry-picked stat that claims that the relative traffic flows will be less than the actual LDP model predicted. First of all, this isn't the full LDP site. And secondly, we provided evidence that the actual levels of traffic would increase by at least 11%, as, by the way, will the population of Gowerton if this goes ahead. Anyway, we commissioned a well-qualified transport consultant, independent consultant, to review the TA, and he firmly stated the scale of development is significantly too large to be accommodated on the local highway network. He's a professional transport consultant, and any reasonable person, including a planning inspector, would respect his evidence-based conclusions. I actually spoke to Mr. Von Weber this week, and he's 100% certain that this should be refused. He works with the Transport Department all the time, and he said he's amazed that they've let this one get so far. He said it looks like this one is just being waved through, presumably under pressure to meet housing targets. His words, not mine. Just to emphasize how unsuitable the site is, I will again state that traffic predictions after occupation in 2026 show peak delays of about 1.5 minutes and a queue of 2 cars without development. And with development, this rises to delays of nearly 20 minutes per car and a queue of 60 cars. 20 minutes just to get out of your street, both for the existing residents and those in the new development, by the way. Heaven knows what would happen if there was a fire or a flood there. This is a totally unacceptable and severe loss of amenity for residents, and we believe you should have no qualms about including this as a second reason for refusal. There are also serious concerns about road safety at the junction. Our consultant has said, and I'm going to quote, "I'm sure the committee members are aware of many applications where the highway officers have recommended refusal based on deficient visibility displays, ranging from single dwellings to much larger sites. The visibility displays at Fairwood Terrace cannot be achieved without the demolition of numbers 1 and 2 Victoria Road, the rugby club building, and some major works to the bridge abutments. This was also mentioned in the road safety audit. Based on the highway officer's rejection of smaller developments with non-compliant visibility displays, then surely this application should be refused for this reason alone. And the standard reason is that the application has failed to demonstrate adequate visibility displays, contrary to policies T1 and T5 of the LDP. The Transport Department have then said something to the effect that a safe design could probably be found in the future. The junction is actually simply unsafe for crossing due to the immovable obstructions, and will it take somebody being killed there to prove it? This is a third reason for refusal. We would urge you to have these strong and reasonable reasons included in your discussions today, and not in a watered down form either. I have successfully defended planning appeals before, and it's only if you've behaved unreasonably that costs would be awarded against the council. And if this were to go to appeal, we would voraciously fight it alongside you. More importantly, if the application was to be granted, we think you would be on very shaky ground in a judicial review or public inquiry if this were passed. I'm sure you're now going to be told that we are wrong, but we are not wrong, and neither is our professional transport consultant, despite a lot of our evidence being largely ignored. So I implore you to let common sense and planning law prevail and stop this unsuitable application by voting for these very solid reasons for refusal. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Now we've got 3 members to speak. First is Councillor Jenkins. Got your 3 minutes. Cheers.
Okay. Thank you, Chair. Now, councillors, you can only vote on the information that's in front of you, okay? Now, in September, Chris Healy admitted that Gowerton's traffic can be bad, but adding time to your journey doesn't equate to a safety problem. Congestion, says Chris, is not a safety issue. Well, that's incorrect, Chris, because in February 2018, the Journal of the American College of Cardiology proved that congestion is linked to heart disease and premature death. In May 21, ScienceDirect.com stated that an increase in congestion was found to have a detrimental effect on road safety when congestion levels are high. Speaking of opinion, Chris shouldn't be able to offer his own assessments on river levels. Chris gives his own judgment, which then colleagues must vote on, which are not helpful, unproven, and without any scientific foundation. Chris produced photographs of an empty Fairwood Terrace at 7:20 p.m. But how many councillors in this room are home at 5 and back out at 7 to the meetings that they attend to? And I'm curious to why you're out there at 7:20 p.m, Chris, when the site works finishes at 6. So that's an interesting. You don't make any submission to the evidence of the professional that Fairwood Terrace, due to too many houses, is too dangerous as a site road. Has this application been treated impartially? Only evidence that supports the application is talked about, with an elevated degree of bias browbeating of Section 311. Yes, there's a risk, but not a certainty of costs upon appeal. Remember, costs are only awarded if members have acted unreasonably when refusing outline. So, colleagues, are you acting unreasonable when questioning an element of residential development? Look up element. It's a section, a portion. For example, a shirt is an element of a man's clothes. Therefore, I submit that an element of residential development would be 50 houses, not 216. Without the full SDH site, elements of development cannot be deduced legally to mean all 216 houses. Traffic is able to be absorbed, says Chris, in the surrounding network. But Chris's own evidence shows 60 cars queuing instead of 2. Residents will be stuck at home with a massive loss of amenities because they won't be able to get anywhere, which is totally against the LDP policy. Chris is then fond of the word indicative. I looked it up. It means likely to happen. But then Chris says on tape, probably not form part of the final scheme. Does any councillor really believe in the park and ride, fold-down rental bikes, temporary refreshments kiosk and car rental scheme? Chris says these are reasonably achievable.
Councillor, if you don't mind not making it personal, you're referring to a planning officer.
I'm just saying what he says.
Yeah,
on the
but if you
tape.
don't mind.
Okay. Safe position. Thank you, Chair. Safe positioning of a crossing section 13 states you must consider actual speed, not just speed limit signage. In other words, speeding motorists will not be able to stop in time. Flood assessments fails in TAN 15, with the authority actually objecting in principle to the application. I'll just end there and ask you support by continuing to refuse outline planning and making choices based on reasonable rejections, not a choice centred on risk against possible appeals. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Jones. Susan Jones. Sorry.
Thank you. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Planning Committee for not actually approving this application in the original form. To approve this application is really to take away another amenity from the village. The removal of this green area, which will be the third facility that's been taken away from our village in the last 3.5 to 4 years. It's destroying all the wildlife of these areas. To educate the children in the native wildlife is essential and adds to the village well-being of the children. The Scouts often use this area to add to their activities and knowledge of wildlife. The removal of a 75-year-old wood to accommodate houses at Kevin Goddard has also destroyed the wildlife of this area. The alterations of the drainage system has resulted in gardens of the existing residents flooding unbelievably flooding at the minute, and that was approved by this council. The extension of our village boundary at George Manning Way also destroyed a green area and destroyed the wildlife also. These areas are important for well-being of the village, and I question the ignoring of the legislation taking into account future generations. The reduction of social housing on this site is only increase the profit of the developer. They do not care to increase the affordable housing situation, which we are told is critical. Profit rules. The traffic solutions at the junction of Fairwood Terrace is against any common sense. The Community Council added to the funding of independent assessment of this area and highlighted the problems envisioned, which highways have supported on requests for a crossing for many years at this location. But this problem with the situation, the visibility has now altered. Money should not govern the situation. The future problems of this junction should be avoided at all costs. The information submitted by Highways detail the increase of the volume of traffic. This decision will add to the deterioration of the well-being of our existing village. Officers had visited a house in Mill Street with a problem for carbon monoxide poisoning. I've not received any update on this situation, and neither has the household, but apparently it isn't the house, it's the volume of traffic outside. But I'm waiting for that information to come back to me. The floodplain that exists in Fairwood Terrace should be greatly considered. As I have mentioned before, residents unable to purchase insurance. We have a duty of care to these residents. The developer will walk away with a profit. The recent flooding in parts of England that have not been experiencing this situation of flooding before highlight the future predicted increase in rainfall. The height of the River Llan is much greater at this moment after the excessive rain. We don't want this to happen in Gowerton in Fairwood Terrace because the knock-on effect of the building of 216 dwellings in this area. Again, the developer will walk away with their profit. The developer has cherry-picked this area and separated it from the original site north of Forest Fach and Wanorlaeth. What happened to the extra road, which was part of the LDP? Again, it should have been progressed. The developer will walk away with their profit, leaving our village with a lack of amenities, with no increase in the infrastructure, affecting the well-being of all our village. I implore you to go against this planning application.
Thank you. Sorry, I missed you out, Mr. Quattroli. I'll bring you in soon after Councillor Jones here. I beg your pardon, Councillor Wyndham Jones.
Right, fine, thanks, Chair. Many thanks for once again giving me the opportunity to speak at this planning meeting. I'm really concerned about this planning application to build the 216 dwellings off Fairwood Terrace for really 3 reasons, and I hope the committee will consider them. I know that all those who know the area well share these real concerns. Gowerton is known as a bottleneck, as travel reports frequently say. If you travel from the M4, you queue frequently. The queue frequently starts at the roundabout below Day's Garage. If you were lucky, you then queue for 1.5 miles to get into Gowerton. If you travel from Gorsinan, you were queuing the whole length of Gowerton Common. If you're travelling from Dunvant, you start queuing before you enter the village, and the same is the case when travelling from Penclouth. If you were travelling from Swansea via Cocket towards Gowerton, you queue from Wanorlaeth, and this is now before the extra vehicles that would be that you'd expect with that development. This happens numerous times every day, and it's worse at weekends and bank holidays. It's not news to people. Everyone who has to travel to or through Gowerton knows it. In short, the scale of this development is significantly too large for the highway network. Then we have the issue of air and noise pollution. All this queuing means one thing for people living in Victoria Road, Mill Street, Sterry Road, Cecil Road, Brynamore Road, Hill Street, Gorworth Road. Yes, real people live there, and this air pollution and noise pollution will be on a massive scale for all those residents. As all this congestion means, we end up with vehicles on stop with their engines running on hot days, and residents living on those roads frightened to open their windows because of the air and noise pollution. This also affects people walking on the pavements, going to school, and of course to the rugby and cricket fields on Victoria Road opposite the junction. I understand that, as Sue mentioned, that residents in Mill Street have recently been diagnosed with carbon monoxide poisoning, and when tests were done, there was no leak in the home, so this clearly came from the street, and that is now before this extra volume of traffic. And then we get to the junction with Fairwood Terrace. There are real concerns over the safety at this junction. Firstly, you have the railway bridge that is hit probably by more vehicles than almost any other bridge in Wales, causing traffic chaos. And it's not an easy fix. You can't move the bridge because of the level of the track. In addition, as members of the planning committee will know, many planning applications are refused based on inadequate visibility displays. The visibility display at Fairwood Terrace is simply not fit for purpose. And I'd say if this development went ahead, it's an accident waiting to happen. In conclusion, when members of the planning committee visited Gowerton, they saw the poor access to this site. There is also a significant development, and I think as Carl mentioned, if all the bedrooms were occupied, we're talking about 11% of the population of Gowerton, with all that means with those extra vehicles. it is all very well for a developer to come in, build these properties and then go. Their legacy will be misery. Misery not just for the residents of Gower, but misery for all those people who travel through Gowerton on a daily basis. And therefore, I'm asking you on this occasion to reject this planning application. And I hope, really for those reasons, it's plain common sense. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I must apologise. I should have brought you in after the first speaker.
No problem
Over
at
to you.
all. No
Thank
problem
you.
at all. Thank you. Thank you, members, for the opportunity to address you today. Detailed comments are contained in my letter of the 27th of September, which I trust have been considered by all parties. The previous committee report recommended approval of the application by officers. That remains officers' position today. Officers have emphasised that the proposal is in accordance with the adopted local development plan and that there are no technical objections from any statutory body or expert consultee. Planning decisions should be made in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. Where material considerations are considered to outweigh adopted policy, these should be evidence-based and not assertion. Based on the evidence presented, the local highway authority and officers from the Environmental Protection Department have not objected to the proposal on traffic congestion or amenity grounds, nor have they provided any support for the reason of refusal 1. Based on the evidence presented, NRW, Swansea Ecology's officer and tree officer have not objected to the proposal, nor have they provided any support for reason for refusal 2. This should be reflected on by members. The applicant concurs with officers' conclusions that the 2 reasons for refusal are not appropriate given the detailed evidence presented in supporting the application and the allocated status of the land within the adopted LDP. I would wish for the committee to additionally consider these points relating to reason for refusal 1 on traffic and highway grounds. As officers have mentioned verbally and in the report, the potential increase of movements arising from the site were considered during the LDP adoption process. As reported by officers, the predicted impact is lower than that considered at the LDP adoption stage. Welsh Government strongly advocate a plan-led system in Wales. Recent Chief Planning Officer letters reaffirm this approach and further advocate housing should be directed to major transport nodes. This allocated site accords with these objectives and will provide a significant transport hub adjacent to Gowerton Station. This could only be provided on this site given the constrained nature of the station approach to the south of the railway. The proposed signalisation of Fairwood Terrace Victoria Road Junction will make it considerably easier and safer for existing residents to access and egress Fairwood Terrace in their vehicles, even with the new development, by introducing dedicated signal green time compared to the current give-way situation. The new signals will also improve pedestrian accessibility and safety, including to bus stops and the rugby club at Fairwood Terrace and Victoria Road. On the loss of trees and the loss of recreational land, again, I reiterate that Swansea Ecology officers and tree officers and NRW have considered this application fully. There is no objection. They support the proposed mitigation and management plan provided thus far and would be secured through any Section 106 agreement. The application is supported by a detailed arboricultural impact assessment and method statement. This identifies that the development will remove 14 individual trees and 7 hectares of broadleaf groups. That was fully anticipated in the allocation of the LDP. In accordance with the now adopted 12th edition of Planning Policy Wales, this requires a replacement planting of 3:1 ratio. The proposed development will provide a minimum of 42 new trees and in excess of 12,500 new replacement whips to form groups and woodland, both on-site and to other land that we control. All of this is in the detailed green infrastructure report. I would reiterate that the land is privately owned, and whilst public rights-of-way do benefit part of the site, it does not allow access to all of the site. Therefore, the comprehensive redevelopment of this site would see significant areas of formal and informal open spaces provided for residents and the existing community. In addition to the above, the development of this allocated site will help address well-documented housing crisis in Swansea. Persimmon Homes' diverse range of market properties are predominantly purchased by local families and first-time buyers. To that end, as a responsible developer, Persimmon Homes recognises the strong local demand for their homes. In line with our original pledge, included within the briefing note to Council and Committee members, Persimmon Homes will extend the local homes guarantee. This will ensure that residents of Swansea will have first refusal on all market homes for the first 8 weeks of the sales launch. To support the application before you, extensive assessment work was carried out at significant expense over a number of years by Persimmon Homes and Urban Style Land. The submission of the application was preceded by promotion of the site through the local development plan, the adoption of the local development plan, and then pre-application advice and assessment in consultation with officers. It was only after these stages that this application was submitted. The consideration of the application has been robust and thorough, as evidenced by the report, and is recommended for approval. I therefore respectfully request that members of the committee support the recommendation of your officers and approve this application. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Now then, you had your hand up first, Councillor Black?
Thank you, Chair. First of all, I think we need to say that not everything is black and white, even in planning. But clearly that, things are open to interpretation. And the view I take of the local development plan paragraph which we've been shown is slightly different to the planning officer, as I no doubt he anticipated when he made the presentation. Clearly, it says it may provide a secondary access to the park and ride to serve a limited amount of spaces and an element of residential development. In my view, given the overall plan for that site, the main access to that residential development, as well as the park and ride, was going to be the link road coming from the railway station side, and at Fairwood Terrace was meant to be a secondary access, and that, in my view, fits in with what we know about Fairwood Terrace, the access to Fairwood Terrace, and particularly that junction by the railway bridge, which it seems to me to be very difficult indeed. I'm not entirely convinced by the proposed traffic light junction on the junction of Fairwood Terrace. No doubt there would need to be some quite important design to make sure that works properly. A child was killed on that road not so long ago, so clearly there are issues with that whole road and the traffic going through that road, and I think that does need to be looked at very closely. However, highways have come up with a design. I'm not a highway expert. I can't override what highways have said. I agree with the officer that we can't really pursue the trees because clearly the intention was that those trees were to disappear in the local development plan. However, I do want to press the reason for refusal in 3.2. It does seem to me that the amount of traffic going through that site using Fairwood Terrace, albeit and that junction as well, would lead to a massive increase in waiting times for traffic going through Gowerton. It would lead to a loss of amenity for residents in Fairwood Terrace, but also a loss of amenity for a lot of other people living in Gowerton and trying to go through Gowerton and access Gowerton. But Gowerton's problem really is it's too popular. Everyone wants to live there, and simply the highway network is not really up to it in terms of allowing people to take up that option. Now, it may well be that you can get better designs and better highway and networking for different sites, but in terms of this particular site, the way it is designed at the moment and the access to that site using Fairwood Terrace as the primary access does seem to me to be unsuitable and will lead to that significant loss of amenity. So I'm happy to move that this application continues to be refused, and that item 3.2 is the reason for refusal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Downing.
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to know why that this was refused in the last meeting, and yet it's coming back here for another go, as it were.
That's the rules.
That's the way I can look at it, because you're going to vote again, whether it's for or against it, not just on the reasons. But anyway, listen to a couple of the speakers. They mentioned the word cherry picked. So I was wondering if they were in the chamber in 2019 when we adopted the LDP, when I asked officers, would strategic sites be cherry picked? And the answer was no. So that's to be explained, because this is strategic site H. Obviously, I didn't have this site in mind when I asked the question, but it is a strategic site, and maybe that can be answered as well. And also, 106 mentions money for schools, yet the LDP mentions a new school. So how does this affect the new school, or will, when the rest of the site comes in, say it's not now viable to build a school because you've already done the 216 houses? So there's these are things that have cropped up to me since the last meeting, because I voted for it. because one thing was, I think the officers explained to me the Spine Road, which I thought was a Spine Road, which was another road coming into this site, but apparently it wasn't. So that's what convinced me, because I'm very, very surprised at the LDP stage that there wasn't, or local members as well as officers didn't pick up, well, hang on, 216 coming out of Fairwood is a lot. Isn't there another road? Because it's a huge site. Strategic Site H is a huge site. And to defend the traffic lights on Fairwood Terrace, my club played in the Elba the last 2 Saturdays, and I started queuing by Garden Village football ground, all the way in. And as I came past the roundabout, I was telling my grandson, I said, oh, we came here for a site visit. See that junction over there? And there was a car sticking out. But by the time I got to there, I couldn't let him out because cars were coming this way. So that car had been there 2-3 minutes. And if you're a boxer, 3 minutes is a long time. And that car was there. If there was traffic lights, he would have gone ages ago. So that's the other side of it. But anyway, if you could explain this couple of things, and then we'll see what happens.
Thank you very much. Sorry, Councillor Jones?
Is it me? So,
Yes.
Chair, did you mean me? Because we got.
Yes.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I agree with the previous speaker, Councillor Black, but I wanted to point out something that we had from the planning officer about 5.43 that he put up on the screen about Fairwood Terrace, and it was demonstrating about the park and ride. But there was another sentence underneath. I wasn't quick enough to write the wording down, but it said something about extra traffic, and maybe we can see 5.43 again. But going to Councillor Downing's point, I was on all the LDP visits, and I'm almost certain I asked the question at the time about the Spine Road on this particular site, and I was under the impression that the whole site would be developed and not split up into lots, which it seems to have been done now. Now, I think I made reference last time and said, no, this was always going to be. But from memory, it was only meant to be a small amount of houses. So whichever way you look at it, 216 houses are a lot of houses with a lot of traffic. But if we can have a look at 5.43, please, again, so we can read the sentence I didn't manage to write down. There we are. It says it's unsuitable for accommodating a substantial volume of additional traffic. So can somebody please explain that bit to me? Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you. From highways.
Yeah, okay. So in terms of the reason the applications come back to committee, it's standard process. Is a 2-stage system. So obviously we received a resolution with some kind of draft reasons for refusal last time. So obviously we draft them into proper or format into proper reasons for refusal to present to you today. So although we still think the application should be approved, those reasons for refusal that were requested by the committee last time are presented within the report. So that's obviously for the committee to decide how they deal with that. In terms of the new school, it's not obviously within this part of the strategic site, but it is something that is going to be proposed on one of the other parts of the strategic site. It's the central part, I think. The eastern, it's the eastern element. That's a larger piece of land with more housing. The school is identified to go in that section of the strategic site. So obviously it will not be accessed via Fairwood Terrace. I mean, going back to this issue of the access road, I mean, the inspector's report clearly identifies access coming from Fairwood Terrace. So I know you can read the LDP 2 different ways, Councillor Black, but the inspector has laid it out pretty clearly there. And if you were to pursue the reason for refusal at section 3.2, somebody is going to have to argue at appeal that what the inspector said there is irrelevant.
Yeah, but the inspector also says it's unsuitable for accommodate a substantial amount of additional traffic.
Which is why
Yeah.
there is different text in the LDP. But what we are saying, what the LDP says is that access can be gained off Fairwood Terrace. The level of development which you can serve will be dependent on traffic assessments, which is where obviously Matt's team come in. But the principle of access coming off via terrace is mentioned there by the inspector.
Yeah, but of course, you know, we're not. This is not being pursued on highway grounds. This is talk about the amenity of local residents and the impact it has on them, which is what I'm proposing here.
But the same principle applies in that
I-
there is one point of access into the site via Fairwood Terrace, and the traffic levels are going to be lower than those we accepted at LDP stage.
That's not what we. Anyway, it's a matter of opinion, isn't it? Yeah.
I think the point all councillors need to be aware of is that you whatever decision you make, we as officers are going to have difficulty defending this at appeal, and we will probably be looking towards councillors to defend any appeal situation. So you need to go into this with your eyes wide open, really, because it's a difficult position to be in if you're going to have difficulty potentially arguing these points at appeal.
Thank you, Chris. Just a minute. Yeah. Did you want to come back with anything from highways, Matt, now or after?
Thanks, Chair. I suppose it's just a case of what you consider to be levels of additional traffic, isn't it? I mean, the trip generation and the modelling suggests sort of 180, 190 two-way movements, which is kind of it's about 3 cars a minute, 4 cars a minute. So in the overall, it's and compared to the amount of traffic that's already on the main road, it isn't a huge increase.
Oh, sorry.
Thanks, Chair. Yeah, I just to emphasise a couple of points really in relation to the LDP, and perhaps clarify a couple of matters. As members know, the LDP is the primary basis for determining this planning application, and it is very clear that the principle of residential development served off Fairwood Terrace is accepted in the LDP. It is about what we're talking about is the quantum, as Matt has said, of what is considered acceptable. There isn't a number defined, a number of units defined in the plan. What it does do is specifically refer to high density development. That's a fact. That's something to bear in mind in your decision. A viability appraisal, the work that was done at the time to underpin, which is one of the supporting documents for the LDP at the time, for instance, appraised the site as a notional 200 units. Now that's at the time when the precise number of units isn't known for every part of the allocation, but that's what it was considered at the time, something that is reasonable to test the viability on. So you've got to couple that, I think, with the references to high density and the fact that this is inherently such a sustainable site in transport terms, which has obviously been set out in the previous presentations on it. So as we've said, the terms of the LDP is that the precise number can only be understood with the benefit of a transport assessment to be submitted, and that's what's been submitted. So really, it's whether or not the analysis that's been done through the transport assessment work, the advice of the highways officers has demonstrated or not that level of traffic generated is acceptable, and the number of homes is acceptable in accordance with what is described in the LDP. The other point I just wanted to emphasise then was this matter that's been picked up a couple of times about cherry picking parts of a strategic site. Again, we have to be clear, there is no basis for a council requiring a whole of a strategic site to come forward as a planning application at the same time. Strategic sites can and are owned by multiple landowners. It's not just the case in this one, it will be the case in other very large allocations that are in the Swansea LDP. What there is a requirement for is that the applications, when they come forward, they are not prejudicial to any other part of that strategic site and don't in any way undermine what is required by the LDP and what we are looking for to be delivered. So that is the test. If there were aspects of this application when we thought that it was compromising the wider site and what's required to be delivered under the terms of the policy, that is something to take into consideration. But it is not, you cannot take into consideration the fact that this is a part of a wider site. We cannot require applications to always acquire all parcels of land within very large strategic sites. And another landowner, another applicant may bring forward a planning application, another larger part of this allocation in the future. So that's something, again, we've got to be clear on when this reference to cherry picking is made. I think that's it from me, Chair.
Thank you very much, Tom. Mark.
Thank you, Chair. I do have several concerns, but I'm not going to echo most of them because they've been raised already. But I don't know whether you're aware. I read the report and I've seen that there's a mine shaft there as well under the proposed development. We've had problems in Pentlegate with exactly the same issue, and there have been settlement issues with new developments in Pentlegate, so that should be borne in mind. The flood risk, I read the report. There's still an element of risk with Zone 2 of the area. That hasn't been addressed fully. I read the figures for the schools projected to 2019. That seems to be accommodated. And the air and dust pollution that Councillor Lyndon Jones already mentioned, that's a major concern as well. But to me, it's the mine shafts, the 4 adits, and the flood risk in Zone 2. I think that should be borne in mind. Thank you, Chair.
No one has wished to speak? No? It was just that matter of the mine shaft and the flood risk then, that was mentioned previously, wasn't it?
Yes, so the obviously the original report deals with flood risk and land stability issues. So we take our advice on flooding matters from NRW. So none of the development site or none of the development areas will be within the worst areas of flooding. NRW have not objected. So it would only be at reserve matter stage when we saw the layout could we obviously agree where the different parts of the development are going, but obviously the developer is aware that there are parts of the site that are prone to flooding and will be aware that those areas have got to be kept free from development. In terms of the past kind of mining legacy, again, that would be all factored in at layout stage. Again, the Call Authority have not raised any objection, but the developer will have to carry out intrusive site investigation works. That's one of the conditions. That's quite standard fare for an application of this nature.
Okay, thank you. Oh, sorry, Matt.
Thank you. One more point that I forgot to talk about was the issue of the junction visibility was raised again by the objectors. I've no concerns around the junction visibility. I've seen the latest objection that's coming this week, and it cites the wrong standard. It's talking about the design manual for roads and bridges, which is a trunk road standard, not for local roads. In terms of local roads, that's governed by manual for streets and the traffic signs manual, which says, because I've just pulled it up, in urban areas, existing builder lines and other features may reduce the visibility possible below that set out above. We've got plenty of junctions with visibility similar to this one, and they're perfectly good safety records.
Thank you very much, Mark. No one else wishes to speak then? No? You sure? No, can't. Pushing it a bit. Right. Thank you. Yeah. You'll have your turn anyway, next item. There. Yeah. No. Sorry. No. Anyway, look, members, everyone, making sure now there's nobody else wishes to speak. But the process is that first off, we have debated any reasons for refusal, and that's what we'll be voting on first. Yeah, sorry.
Need a second.
Oh, sorry,
Black
yeah.
has moved it to the
Yes,
second.
yeah, you're quite right. Before we do that, is anyone going to second those reasons for refusal before we go to vote? No? No? Sure, that's a strange one. Okay. So that hasn't been seconded then, yeah? No? So then, am I right now? We go back to the original. Yeah, so that means that then the committee has to go back to the original recommendation, which would be approval of this application.
Yeah.
Yes, we take that vote. Thank you.
5 seconds. Nobody seconded your proposal for the reasons for refusal.
Since when we had to have seconders in planning committee, this is a first.
Yeah, we always have a
Yeah.
mover and a seconder.
Yes.
Sorry.
So we, the reasons for refusal haven't been seconded. They've been moved but not seconded. So unless there's any members want to second the reasons for refusal, then we will vote on the recommendation which is for approval. So are there any members that want to second Councillor Black's reason for refusal?
So I didn't know they were councillor Blacks. I thought it was the officers. I'm getting confused. At home, we can't actually understand what's going on.
Well, no, the officer's recommendation in the report is for approval because they don't believe it's strong enough. That's what they've said, Councillor Jones. So Councillor Black has moved the reason at 3.2. Sorry, thank you. And Councillor Tribe has seconded it now. So we can go back to votes for refusal now. So is everyone clear with that? Sorry.
That's understood. Yes? Well understood. Thank
On the reason for refusal now. So Councillor Meyer Baker. Peter Black.
For.
Phil Downing.
Abstain.
Alan Jeffrey. Mary Jones.
For.
Mike Lewis.
Against.
Nicola Matthews.
For.
Mark Tribe.
For.
Mike White.
Sorry. Against.
Andrew Williams.
Abstain.
And Paul Lloyd.
Okay.
That's 5 for, 4 against and 2 abstentions, Chair. So the reason for refusal has been approved.
very much. Then, excuse me a minute. Then we move on to then item 6, right? And the first item there is the HMO application for Clare Street. You'll find that on page 166. First off, sorry.
Thank you, Chair.
Sorry, is somebody speaking because we can't hear?
Just a minute. Clearing, the room is clearing first.
Thank you, Chair. Okay. Full planning permission then is sought for a change of use of 12 Clare Street in Manselton from a 4-bedroom dwelling house, which is Class C3, to a 6-bedroom house in multiple occupation, which is Class C4. The application has been called into committee by Councillor Black, and the objection threshold has been met following a receipt of a petition containing 30 signatures from different addresses. Next slide, please.
Okay, this slide shows the general location of the site in the context of the surrounding area and the wider setting. Clare Street is located in a dense residential area of Swansea. Next slide, please. This is a closer plan of the area, and the application site is outlined in red. The surrounding area is characterised primarily by two-storey terrace dwellings with small front gardens and larger rear gardens. The properties do not benefit from any off-street parking, and Clare Street generally contains unrestricted on-street parking, apart from a small section at the end of the street near the junction with Eaton Road. There is also dedicated disabled vehicle space outside the application property. The section of Clare Street between Zout Street and Manor Road is one way, and this includes the application property. This, however, does allow space for on-street parking on both sides of the road. Next slide, please. So this is the existing elevations and floor plans of the property. It currently has a living room, study, dining room, kitchen, and a WC on the ground floor. And then it has 4 bedrooms with a shower room at first floor. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed elevations and floor plans of the property. The proposed plan indicates that there will be 2 bedrooms, each with an ensuite shower room and a kitchen, dining room, living room, and a WC on the ground floor. And then the first floor will retain the first floor, the 4 bedrooms, but each will benefit an ensuite shower room. So very minor external alterations are proposed to the building, mainly by raising or lowering sill levels from existing windows and openings at the rear. Next slide, please. So this is the proposed site plan, showing that the rear garden will contain a bin store, a cycle store, and additional planting. The size of this space at the rear is similar to neighbouring properties in the street. Next slide, please. So turning to the photographs, this is the front elevation of the property. It forms part of a 2-storey, predominantly stone-fronted terrace properties. The photo also shows the disabled parking space demarcated in the front of this site. Next slide, please. So Clare Street is built on a hillside, and the photograph is taken from the vicinity of the front elevation of the property, looking down the street towards Eaton Road. Next slide, please. This is a similar photograph, but taken in the middle of the road, looking down in the same direction. Next slide, please. These 2 photographs are taken from the lower part of Clare Street, with one on the left hand looking towards Eaton Road and contains some restricted parking areas. The photo on the right hand side looks back up Clare Street towards the direction of the application site. The photograph is taken near the junction with Zout Street and Clare Street, where it becomes one way. Next slide, please. These 2 photographs are taken from the upper end of Clare Street. This one on the left-hand side looks down through Clare Street where the one-way street ends. And then the other one on the right-hand side looks in the opposite direction where Clare Street merges with Elgin Street. Next slide, please. So this is taken from the rear of the properties on Clare Street, and the application site is the one in the middle with a cream-rendered rear wing and benefits from that rear garden. Next slide, please. So the proposal is seeking to change the use on the property from a 4-bedroom dwelling house to a 6-bedroom HMO. The application has been subject to public consultation, including a receipt of a petition, as mentioned earlier, and 17 individual letters of objection. The grounds of objection are quite varied, and they are detailed on page 173 of the report. These include matters such as lack of car parking spaces in the area, impacts on the character of the area, including over-concentration of HMOs, and amenity issues, including noise and antisocial behaviour. In terms of the principle of the use, the report makes a comprehensive assessment of the proposal against the criteria of policy H9 of the LDP, which specifically deals with HMO proposals, and this is supplemented by an SPG on HMOs. It also includes consultation with colleagues in the placemaking and strategic planning section and the Council's HMO team. So the report includes the map, which is replicated on this slide before you. This forms part of the evidence base in addressing policy H9. In regard, the property lies outside the Council's defined HMO management area, and as such, there is a limit of 10% of all residential properties within a 50-metre radius can be HMOs. So there are 34 residential properties within that 50-metre radius. And according to the records held, there are no other HMO properties within this radius.
The concentration of HMOs within the 50-metre radius would therefore be 2.94% and would be well below the 10% concentration threshold set out by policy H9 of the LDP. The development would not result in a Class C3 dwelling being sandwiched between other HMOs, and it's not considered to be a small street, which are other aspects of the tests outlined by policy H9 and the SPG. In terms of residential amenity, the report considers that the 6 bedrooms and the communal areas would meet or exceed the minimum room sizes set out in the SPG and would achieve adequate level for the amenity of the occupants, with many such rooms utilising existing habitable rooms, but with modified window openings. The rear garden would provide outdoor space for residents and as well as space for refuse and cycle facilities and ecological enhancements, all of which would be subject to a planning condition. The Council's own HMO team have raised no objections to the proposal, subject to an informative note. In terms of impact on neighbouring residents, there would not be any extensions. Therefore, the proposal would not have any overbearing or reductions in outlook or light beyond the present situation. No new openings are proposed, therefore the existing window openings will be utilised, although modified in their size, but this would not lead to any unreasonable overlooking and in visual terms would not harm the impact of the surrounding area. In regards to noise and disturbance, the report explains that the use of the property for 6 unrelated individuals would not have any impact in excess beyond a family home. However, a condition has been recommended restricting the occupancy of the property by 6 residents, as this will allow effective control of the development in the interest of residential and general amenity. As mentioned, the Council's own HMO team have raised no objections, and there are separate legislation associated with claims of statutory noise that would be governed, for example, by the pollution control team of the Council. Antisocial behaviour is a matter that's primarily investigated by the police, but there is no overriding evidence that's been submitted to indicate that the change of use of this particular property to a HMO and occupied by 6 residents would lead to antisocial behaviour. The proposal would not breach the concentration tests set out in policy H9 of the LDP and the SPG, as I explained. So based on the available evidence, it is considered that it would not lead to any increase in antisocial behaviour or result in any harmful effects to social cohesion within the local community. In terms of parking and highway matters, the report acknowledges that the existing property does not benefit from any off-road parking, and neither does the majority of surrounding properties. As shown in the photographs, Clare Street generally contains unrestricted on-street parking apart from small areas. A section of Clare Street between South Street and Manor Road is one way, but it does allow some on-street parking on both sides of the road, on the road, and the report considers that there would be some opportunities for parking on the street. The Council's parking standard SPG advises that the dwellings use within a Class C3 require a parking space up per bedroom up to a maximum of 3, and for a HMO, 3 spaces are required for the first 6 occupants and then additional space per occupant beyond that. So when you work the calculations, the report considers that the report would not have any greater impact on highway safety or parking requirements above the existing extant use of the property. Whilst it is possible that the area may be predominantly owner-occupied, as raised by some local residents, the report explains that due to the absence of other HMOs in the immediate area, and that they would not conflict with the policy H9 and the concentration tests, the scheme would not unduly dilute or harm the dominant character of the area or result in any harmful effects to social cohesion within the local community. So the report concludes that the relevant policies and the guidelines have been satisfied and is recommended for approval subject to conditions. Thank you, Chair.
All right, thank you very much. And then speakers first is Councillor Holly.
Thank you very much, Chairman. I have to say I'm awfully glad I'm not on planning. I probably by this time would have pulled the little hair I got out. I have to say, as an elected member, we here to represent the public, and the public who actually are out there rely on our officers and our as a council to do the best for them. And part of that is actually the planning process. Planning should be about people and not just about policies. But unfortunately, earlier on, I got the impression that we were more concerned about policies than we are about people. And going on to this particular case, this is an ideal case where this comes to light. I'm not sure how many people in this room actually ever go to watch Super Swans in the Swansea.com stadium. If you do, you will see the highest concentration of parking in residential areas that outside of many of the larger cities in England. Councillor White lives not too far away from the stadium, and Clare Street is within the active travel area of that stadium as well. So on occasions, I'm not saying all the time, but on occasions, the area around Mansell and up as far as Cumbulla is absolutely packed with cars and vans and buses. Now, to say this is that HMO will only produce at the maximum 3 cars, there are, except that, there are houses in Mansellton, there are houses in other parts of Swansea as well that have more than 3 cars. There are some people, and not far from where I live, we have a family that have 3 cars. The husband works for a firm that allows him to bring his van home. And his wife also sometimes brings a van home. So there's 5 vehicles in that house. Who's to say this isn't going to happen here? That the 6 people that we're allegedly going to live there don't all have a car. Maybe they all have vans or work for somebody that lends them a car or van. So there could be this. And the issue is the Mansellton estate was not built for vehicles. It was built for pedestrians. There are very few roads in that area that can accommodate the issues, the volume of traffic that we got now. And to add to that volume of traffic, what you are doing is taking away an amenity or an ability for people to have a reasonable lifestyle in that area. And I urge you to consider what we're going to do in the future, because this is only going to get worse. It's going to get worse in some of these new estates where you put in parking and people then automatically, they got a garage or will turn that into a house or turn that into a living room or jet or a gym room or whatever. So their parking is restricted down then. So this is going to get worse. Parking is a major issue. And I'm afraid that we need to consider that. And I urge the members of this committee to turn this down. And I ask them to turn it down on the grounds that we can't carry on any longer ignoring the fact that people's amenities, including the use of a car and parking space anywhere near their home, is a major issue in this city. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Can I just say at the start, I've read very carefully through this report and I've taken note of what the officer has to say and listened very carefully to what he said, and I accept that within the policies which we have in front of us, that clearly this application is compliant with those policies. So, you know, clearly that is an issue which needs to be taken into account. However, I do share the concerns that Councillor Holly has just expressed in terms of parking. Absolutely, 3 is the maximum which was required of a HMO, of 6 occupants. But as Councillor Holly said, there is clearly an issue where, you know, the likelihood is that more than 3 of those occupants will have a car or a vehicle of some sort. Because with a house, you know, a family may have 3 cars, but of course it's a family, it's 1 unit, so they might share those cars. Here you have 6 separate units occupying this property, and as such, that it seems to me that you could easily have 6 cars being used by the occupants of this particular property. Now, Mansellton has a huge problem. It's not just when the Swans are playing, it's a massive problem when the Swans are playing. Mansellton has a massive problem with parking. It is very difficult to park anywhere near your house. I have difficulty few streets away, other people have difficulty. Clare Street is a one-way street, it's been pointed out. Clearly people are able to park on both sides, as they are in any other street in Manchester. But even then, and the fact that the photographs, I think, were taken during the day, when you can clearly see there is a substantial number of cars parked there already. So clearly that when it comes to the evening, though, all those spaces are full, chock-a-block full. And I think adding an additional 3, 4, 5 cars on top of that by introducing a HMO in this area is going to cause a problem. And of course, as the officer has pointed out, there is a disabled bay outside this property as well. Now, we don't know if any of the applicants are going to be able to utilise that disabled bay, but if they're not, then that's one less parking space which is available to them. Clearly, because they may not have a blue badge to use that. So, on balance, having listened to the officer, having read the report, I feel that we need to turn this down on the grounds on highway grounds, on the grounds that it would be only a loss of amenity to local residents by the number of vehicles coming to that property. Sure.
Thank you, Councillor Jeffries.
This on. Thank you, Chair. I fully concur with both Councillors Hollies and Black on this. If I can say, Chair, I've been a councillor for 30 months in the Uplands ward here, and since taking office, I've experienced issues with HMO every week, and often several times a week, with issues concerning parking, noise, over-concentration, domestic waste, and what I feel most importantly is the dilution of a community where families have actually moved out as a concentration of HMOs. Although we're only talking about one case here, and it's well within the concentration factor of 10%. I fully accept that, but it is one, and I wonder, Councillor Holly referred to the future. I wonder where would this lead to in the future, and if more and more HMOs tend to take place, then it's the dilution of a community that would concern me. In addition to the parking issues, and what will inevitably happen again is the disposal and the management of domestic waste. So I couldn't support this application on those grounds alone. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Downing.
Unfortunately, Chair, Peter did mention policy. Very difficult to turn this down, to be quite honest. If you look at the other side of it, 4 bedrooms, family, 2 children, mother, father, and they've all got cars. So you've got 4 cars there. That could be that could be what it is. It does say that you can't have 2 C4s with a C3 in the middle. It's a pity we can't have 2 C3s with a C4 in the middle. Then we'd be all right. Then we'd have a policy. But otherwise, I find it very difficult, and you've got parking problems wherever you go, and it's a case of first come, first served. But there's a knock-on effect then, in it. If next door has 4 children and next door has 4 children, look at the cars you got then, and they'd be all going to their local councillors to find parking elsewhere, and they'd all be against any new ones coming in with parking. Thank you.
Yeah, just to say that we as a committee voted for the SPG for this 10%. If we'd thought that 10% was too much and we wanted to make it 2.5%, in fact, we would have voted for that. But Councillor Jeffries, 25% in his area, 15% over in the east side. So it's only 10%, but of that, so if there was more HMO development in this area, it couldn't go above the 10% because then we would refuse it. That is why we set the 10% in the SPG, which we went through over the course of, I believe, 18 months before we came to a conclusion. So I cannot see a reason to vote against this. Sorry.
Just thank you, Chair. Again, just to make well, the fact that that I've come across, although it's just 25% here in the Uplands ward. And if I take one street for example, which is Bryn Road along here, there are 80 HMOs there, and there's 104 houses. Now, to me, the concentration there is 80%. Yet, I mean, in a meeting we had here previously, a particular house managed to fit because of the location of that house within the other domiciles around. It did fit into that 25% factor. But I mean, there is a statement I think in the LDP that refers to an over concentration. I mean, there was, although it's 25% is the factor that we work to. I mean, I'm just giving an example there with 80 houses out of 104. I mean, to me, that's over concentration. Yeah.
Thank you. Was there anything you wanted to come back with, Eileen?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Seems to be a very highway dominated committee meeting today. So, and I don't have the benefit of the highway officer here. So, okay. I appreciate the comments that's been made. Okay. I can only tell you, as what's been pointed out, these are the guidelines, these are the policies that are out there, and I've given you photographs. Those photographs were taken by myself between 4 and 4:30 in an evening kind of scenario. Yes, it is in an area that you can see that on-street parking. You know, I can imagine its close proximity of the stadium can draw its own issues. But over the course of a week, you might have 1 or 2 games there in a week, for example, where they would draw some crowd. But for the remaining part of it, then you won't have that pull, for example. Equally, whilst you could say that it's possible that 6 residents could have 6 cars, but it's still possible that you could have 6 residents with no cars. It is in a fairly sustainable location. You know, the fact that people can park there and walk to the Swansea Stadium, for example, you still got to look at the sustainability factor of it as well in your decision. And Welsh Government is putting kind of limits on maximum thresholds in the interest of sustainable living, etc. So the evidence is there. I always say follow the evidence, and the evidence that's in the report based on adopted guidelines by the planning committee, based on what the recommendation is to approve. It's whether or not you would agree with that report. Thank you very much.
Can I just say, the email which I sent calling this application in could possibly be determined as pre-determining the application. I don't believe I did, but just so that to be on the safe side, I'm not going to vote either for, against, or abstain in this thing. But I've just presented the case as a local member, and I will stand back from the voting. So there's no need to even call my name on this. And can I just say, I'm astonished you were able to access the rear lane to take that photograph. Thank you, Chair.
Can be done, right? No, thank you. Does anyone else wish to speak? No? No? Sure. Okay, members, well, you know, we have had the case presented to us and the policies that come with it as well. And you know, they were, as Councillor Lewis said, they were passed in this committee. But you know, we will take that vote now and see where the result ends up. Thank you, Gareth.
Okay. Councillor Mildbaker. Bill Downing.
For.
Alan Jeffrey.
Against.
Mary Jones.
For.
Mike Lewis.
For.
Nicola Matthews.
For.
Mark Tribe.
Against.
Mike White.
For.
Andrew Williams.
For.
Paul Lloyd.
For.
That's 8 for, 2 against, Chair.
8, so that's carried. Thank you very much. And thank you all for this afternoon. That concludes our business. And we'll be back again within a month. Bonfire day. Thank you.